The sky had always been a constant, a reminder of what was beyond what humanity had yet to discover, the vastness that beckoned with mysteries and promises of the unknown. Yet no one had ever imagined that one day that same sky would betray them. The first sight of something was small, like a star in the night, but it grew and grew until it swallowed the heavens. The clouds parted, and the city streets went silent. People looked up and saw shapes dark against the sun, and their minds couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. The ships descending from above like vultures to a carcass, a sense of dread gnawing at the hearts of millions. The first impact was in New York, a flash of blinding light, so bright that it cut through the haze of human activity. Below, buildings crumbled into dust. Within seconds, entire blocks were vaporized, and the skyline that had stood for centuries fell in the blink of an eye. The sound of the explosion never reached the ears of the people who had been standing moments before on those same streets. They were gone before the first cry could even be heard. Across the world, in Paris, London, Tokyo, the world's greatest cities were met with the same fate. Humanity scrambled in fear and confusion. The military responded quickly, but there was no strategy for something like this. They had satellites to track enemy movements, but these ships had come from nowhere. The weapons they unleashed were beyond comprehension. Nothing seemed to stand against them. Even the most advanced technology Earth had was rendered useless. By the time the resistance was forming, there was little left to hold on to. Governments fell without warning. Power structures fractured. People looked for safety in the dark corners of their homes, but there was nowhere to hide. The invaders came and went like a storm, sweeping through the earth, leaving behind nothing but ash and ruin. Some thought it was the end. The entire planet bent under the weight of the assault. It was an invasion not just of space, but of will. In the midst of it all, in a small laboratory on the outskirts of what remained of a shattered metropolis, a woman named Darlena Novak stared at the screens in front of her, her fingers trembling as she typed furiously, her mind racing to make sense of what was happening. The data in front of her didn't match anything she had ever seen. These were no ordinary ships, no mere conquerors. They were something else entirely. She had stumbled onto something small, a flicker in the alien technology, a flaw perhaps, or a way in, but she wasn't sure if it was enough to matter. Not when the world was dying around her, the hum of her computer screen the only sound in the dimly lit room. She knew time was running out. There had to be a way to fight back. Her breath caught as the screen flickered again, a pattern emerging, a shape she recognized not from any earthly design, but something else, a weakness, something that could be exploited. It was so simple that the implications were staggering if it worked. Outside her window, she could hear the distant rumble of another explosion, buildings collapsing from the impact of yet another alien ship setting down in the heart of the city. She had no choice. This was it, humanity's first chance at survival, and it was going to have to be enough. If it wasn't, nothing would stop the end of everything they had ever known. In the aftermath of the initial assault, humanity was left in chaos. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, and the world's military forces were scattered. The first few days were nothing but confusion and terror as people tried to understand what was happening and what they could do to survive in the face of an invader so powerful and so relentless. It seemed like there was no hope left, but humanity wasn't going to lie down and die, not without a fight. Across the planet, scattered pockets of resistance began to form, small groups of survivors gathering in the dark corners of cities where the alien ships hadn't yet landed. Their numbers were few at first, just desperate souls clinging to the hope that something could be done. But even in those early moments, they realized something crucial. Humanity had one thing the invaders did not: adaptability in the face of impossible odds. Humans had been surviving for millennia on a planet that was constantly changing, and if they could survive this war, they would need to tap into that same resourcefulness. Darlena Novak's discovery was the spark the world needed. She had realized that there was a weakness, a small but important flaw in the alien ships that could be exploited. It wasn't much, but it was something, and as word spread about her findings, scattered groups of survivors who had no idea who she was but recognized the significance of her work began to act on it. The first real victory came when a small team of resistance fighters managed to infiltrate an alien outpost using old tech and primitive tactics. They took down a single warship, disabling its energy shields just long enough for them to plant explosives and send it crashing to the ground. The fight was brutal, and many died in the process, But the victory was huge. The aliens had not expected humans to fight back, and this moment made them question everything. It didn't stop there. The victories began to build on themselves. Once they had taken down one ship, they learned how to take down more. They developed new ways of hacking alien systems, using what they could scavenge from the wreckage of destroyed ships and human ingenuity. Soon the resistance had a foothold, and the invaders were beginning to feel the pressure. For the first time in the war, humans were forcing them to rethink their plans. Resistance cells began forming worldwide. Guerrilla tactics became the go-to strategy. Instead of fighting head-on with advanced alien weaponry, humans used their knowledge of the terrain, their cities, their forests, their mountains, and used the land itself as a weapon. They would strike fast, disappear into the night, and let the invaders waste precious time trying to track them down. The resistance was growing, and the hope that had seemed lost was beginning to return. In the midst of it all, there was a quiet meeting between resistance leaders in a small hidden base outside of what had once been Washington, D.C. The leaders were diverse military commanders, engineers, scientists, and civilians. They all had one goal now: to form a united front and take the fight to the invaders. They knew it wasn't going to be easy. They knew they would suffer losses, but they also knew something the aliens didn't. This was humanity's home, and they weren't going to give it up without a fight. The plans were set. A series of coordinated strikes on alien supply lines across the globe would begin the following week. The world was still reeling from the devastation, but the message was clear: humanity was no longer willing to bow down. They were rising, and they were going to fight until they had nothing left. As the resistance gained ground, the truth became undeniable. The aliens had underestimated humanity. What began as desperate raids turned into coordinated strikes across the globe. However, even with victories, it was clear that the humans lacked the technological firepower to confront the alien invasion head-on. The humans were resourceful, but they were still fighting a war of attrition against a vastly superior enemy. That was until Dr. Lena Novak's discovery became their last hope. After the first successful sabotage of an alien warship, Novak and her team were focused on one thing: the disruptor. Her theory was simple but audacious: an energy-based weapon capable of overriding the alien shielding systems. If it worked, it could make the invaders' formidable technology useless, allowing humanity's forces to finally strike with lethal precision. With little time and fewer resources, Novak's team of engineers, scientists, and military experts worked around the clock in secret. They were holed up in an underground bunker beneath the ruins of what had been a thriving technological research center before the invasion. The base was quiet except for the hum of machines and the frantic scurry of fingers on keyboards. They had no choice but to push forward. Every passing moment saw more death, more destruction. The initial test of the prototype was to be conducted in an old industrial complex on the outskirts of what used to be Chicago. No one expected it to work perfectly, but they all knew that if it did, it could change everything. The plan was simple: use the prototype on a single alien vessel that had remained in the area, and see if they could bring its shields down long enough to deliver a fatal blow. If it failed, the world would likely be forced into full retreat. If it succeeded, however, it could be the breakthrough that turned the tide of the war. The night of the operation was tense. Resistance fighters from various cells were mobilized to create distractions, drawing alien attention away from the industrial complex where Novak's team was waiting. The military-grade drones they'd managed to piece together, scavenged from downed alien ships, flew silently above, keeping watch. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. The team had one shot. They knew it. They'd scored every piece of alien technology they could find, reverse engineering what they could, adapting human tools and techniques to create something that could disrupt the invaders' shields. As they activated the prototype, a low hum filled the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a flash of light, the shields of the alien warship flickered and sputtered before failing completely. The resistance forces watching from afar erupted in disbelief. The impossible had just happened. It was only a brief window of opportunity. With the shields down, The strike teams launched their final assault, unleashing explosives on the alien vessel. The air crackled with energy, and the ground shook as the ship crumpled, its technology rendered useless. The victory was small, but it was monumental. The aliens had never faced anything like this. For the first time, they were vulnerable. Novak and her team had done the unthinkable, creating a weapon that could neutralize the enemy's advantage. News of the success spread like wildfire. Across the globe, humanity's resistance surged forward. Emboldened by the possibility of victory, the invaders had made a critical mistake by underestimating the ingenuity of a species that had only recently learned to use the stars. Now, with the disruptor in hand, they had a real chance to win. But this success came at a cost. The prototype was still unstable, and the aliens would not sit idle. They would adapt, and the resistance would have to keep fighting harder than ever before. The victory at the industrial complex had ignited a renewed hope within humanity. The alien forces had been stunned by the sudden failure of their shields, and for the first time since the invasion began, their superiority was questioned. The resistance forces, armed with the knowledge of how to neutralize the alien ship's defenses, pushed forward with a new sense of purpose. But the aliens were not passive adversaries, and their response was swift and brutal. Within days, the aliens launched a full-scale retaliation. The ground trembled beneath the assault as new monstrous war machines descended from the skies. These were not the sleek ships humanity had been able to target before. No, these were behemoths, towering, heavily armored vessels that glided across the earth like gods of war. Their weapons could level entire cities with a single shot, and their sheer firepower seemed unstoppable. The resistance had barely begun to adapt to their new weapon when these towering titans appeared, and humanity's hope began to fade as quickly as it had ignited. The alien counterattack was unrelenting. The first target was Paris. In a single, cataclysmic assault, the heart of Europe was obliterated. Not just the city, but its entire cultural and historical legacy was reduced to rubble. The Eiffel Tower, a symbol of human ingenuity and spirit, was nothing more than a twisted pile of metal and stone. The resistance tried to mount a defense, but it was futile. Every defensive measure they had, every tactic they had perfected in the wake of their earlier successes, was destroyed in minutes. The resistance forces were routed, and the invaders moved on. Soon after, the same fate befell London and Tokyo. The world's most iconic cities were no longer places of refuge. The human race found itself being pushed into hiding, fragmented and scattered. The hope that had surged after the victory at the industrial complex began to wither as the alien war machines laid waste to humanity's last bastions of defense. For the survivors, the days that followed were the darkest yet. The resistance regrouped, pulling together what few resources they had left. The prototype disruptor, which had given them a glimmer of victory, was not enough to combat the alien onslaught. The weapon had been a breakthrough, but it wasn't a silver bullet. It was still unstable and difficult to mass produce. The resistance could not rely on it alone. They would need something else. A strategy, a miracle, anything to survive. The leadership of the resistance held a somber council. They knew that their options were running out. The invaders had already shattered every major military force and destroyed their most vital supply chains. Humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction, and the alien forces were closing in for the kill. But it was in their darkest hour that humanity's spirit began to shine brightest. The human will to survive, to protect their home and their families, refused to be extinguished. As alien forces advanced on a decimated New York, Captain Victor Hale, a war hero turned resistance leader, addressed a hidden assembly of commanders, scientists, and soldiers. "We've faced worse odds," he said, his voice steady. "We've fought through plague, famine, and war before. We survived because we never gave up. This is no different. We may be battered, but we are not broken. We may not have the technology to match them, but we have something they don't, a reason to fight. His words were simple, but they reignited a fire in the hearts of those who heard them. They didn't need miracles. They needed unity. They needed strategy. And most of all, they needed to remember what they were fighting for. The fight was no longer about defeating an invader. It was about survival, about the future of humanity, about ensuring their children would never grow up under the shadow of alien rule. The plans were quickly drawn up. A final, desperate counteroffensive to cripple the alien supply lines and disrupt their command centers. It was a suicide mission for many, but it was humanity's last shot at survival. If they didn't act now, they would lose everything. The resistance was no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to make sure the aliens would never forget what it meant to challenge humanity. The world had reached its breaking point, but it was far from finished. The alien retaliation was brutal, but it was also telling. The invaders had not anticipated the sheer determination of humanity. They had believed that once their overwhelming war machines had ravaged Earth's cities, the human race would simply collapse in fear and surrender. Instead, humanity rallied, a testament to its unbreakable will to survive. The resistance, scattered across the globe and battered by countless losses, had now found its footing. The success of the disruptor, even if still in its infancy, had proven that the invaders were not invincible. Dr. Lena Novak's discovery had given the resistance the key to undermining their technological dominance. But there was still one major hurdle: the alien leadership. The resistance had learned a great deal from the downed ships and intercepted communications, but they had yet to truly understand the nature of the alien hierarchy. Their society was not one of unity, but one of factions, each with its own agenda, goals, and commanders. It was this fractured power structure that could be exploited. Zorik, an alien defector who had once been a high-ranking officer in the invaders' military, had brought vital information to the resistance. His revelations had shattered the invaders' image of unity. The aliens, Zorik explained, were not a single force under one command. Rather, they were a coalition of powerful warlords who had only agreed to invade Earth in exchange for resources. The various factions were now at odds, some questioning the morality of their invasion, others eager for conquest, and some driven by pure self-interest. Zorik had become a symbol of hope for the resistance, a living, breathing example that not all aliens were the same. But more importantly, his knowledge of the alien inner workings became a priceless asset. The resistance leadership, now emboldened by their successes and fueled by Zorik's intelligence, formulated a daring new plan. The plan was simple: target the alien leadership, divide their forces, and strike at the heart of their military command. A series of strategic operations would weaken the alien factions, sowing discord and chaos within their ranks. The goal was to destabilize their chain of command long enough to allow humanity's forces to deal the final blow. The first phase of the plan began with a coordinated strike on one of the aliens' most important strategic centers, a military installation deep in the heart of an alien-controlled city. The resistance forces, using guerrilla tactics, infiltrated the heavily guarded compound. The humans moved swiftly and silently, using Zorik's insider knowledge to bypass alien security systems. They planted explosives on key command structures and struck down alien officers who were known to be loyal to the more ruthless warlords. The operation was a success, but it came at a cost. Many lives were lost, and the retaliation from the aliens was immediate. However, the damage had been done. The alien faction loyal to the warlords had been severely crippled, and it sent shockwaves through the invader leadership. With their communication systems sabotaged and their chain of command in disarray, the alien forces were forced to regroup. Meanwhile, the resistance carried out further sabotage operations, targeting alien supply lines, communication hubs, and weapon depots. Every strike weakened the invaders' ability to maintain control. Tensions among the alien factions grew, and as the warlords turned on each other, the once unified alien force began to splinter. The cracks were becoming visible. The invaders were no longer a single united front. They were fractured, divided by greed, ideology, and self-preservation. It was in these fractures that humanity found its opening, a chance to defeat them, not by sheer might, but by dividing and conquering their fractured empire. Captain Victor Hale, leading the final assault, knew this was the turning point. The next series of attacks would be the final push. If they succeeded, the alien invasion would collapse under its own weight, and Earth would be free. If they failed, humanity would be wiped from existence. As the Resistance prepared for their most dangerous mission yet, one thought echoed in their minds. The aliens may have underestimated humanity once, but they would never do so again. The alien factions were in chaos. Their once pristine unity had shattered into a million pieces, each warlord now more concerned with personal gain than the success of the invasion. The Resistance, still reeling from the loss of some of their best fighters, knew that this moment was the turning point, their last, desperate chance to win the war and reclaim their planet. The plan was as risky as it was daring. The fractured alien leadership was vulnerable, but they were also more dangerous than ever, fighting not for conquest, but for survival. Captain Victor Hale, now a symbol of the Resistance's strength and resilience, knew that they could not afford another failure. This time, they had to hit the heart of the alien empire itself. The Resistance's intelligence had pinpointed the location of the aliens' central command, a massive, heavily fortified space station in orbit above Earth, known as Valsharn. It was the brain of their operations, where all strategic decisions were made and their forces coordinated. If the Resistance could disable Valsharn and take control of the station, they would cripple the alien leadership and sow irreversible discord. The war would end on humanity's terms. But getting to Valsharn was no easy task. The station was surrounded by fleets of alien warships, each more powerful than any Earth-made vessel. It was protected by energy shields that even the Disruptor could barely scratch, and its defenses were controlled by an elite group of alien generals, fiercely loyal to their warlord leaders. Yet the Resistance knew that time was running out. Every day the aliens regrouped, they grew stronger. It was now or never. The Resistance's forces had grown, not just in numbers but in determination. They had successfully adapted their tactics to exploit the weaknesses of alien technology. And now, with Jorik's intelligence guiding them, they had a plan to infiltrate Valsharn from within. The key to success lay in a small team of elite fighters, engineers, and scientists who would board the alien station under the cover of darkness, using a hijacked alien ship. The mission was codenamed Operation Eclipse. The team consisted of the best and brightest humanity had to offer. Captain Hale, Dr. Lena Novak, Jorik, and a few select Resistance commanders. Together, they would board the enemy's station, disable its shields, and upload a virus into its systems that would collapse the alien command structure. But they were not alone in their mission. The world's remaining military forces had banded together for a final desperate assault. The skies over Earth were filled with fighter jets, drones, and hastily constructed warships, all ready to fight the last battle. The alien fleet above Valsharn was vast, but humanity's resolve was even greater. It was clear that this was the final stand. As the team approached the station in their stolen alien vessel, the final battle began to unfold below them. Resistance forces launched simultaneous attacks on alien strongholds around the world, keeping the invaders distracted long enough for the team to reach Valsharn. The skies lit up with explosions as human forces clashed with the remaining alien warships, desperately trying to keep the invaders from re-establishing control over Earth. Inside Valsharn, the team moved swiftly through the station's labyrinthine corridors, evading patrols and disabling security systems. Dr. Novak worked tirelessly to hack into the station's central systems, while Hale and the rest of the team cleared a path through the station, ensuring the mission could continue. The alien forces were everywhere, but they were no longer organized. The factionalism that had plagued them since the Resistance's first victories had taken its toll. The tension was unbearable as they reached the heart of the station. A single final strike would disable its power core, and the alien warlord's ability to command the war would be shattered. But they were not alone. A group of elite alien soldiers, loyal to their faction's leader, awaited them. The final confrontation was inevitable. But Captain Hale knew one thing for certain. Humanity would never give up. No matter the odds, they would fight until their last breath. Inside Valsharn, the air felt heavy with the pulse of alien technology, an eerie hum that vibrated through the walls as if the station itself were alive. Dr. Lena Novik's fingers flew across the console, her mind laser-focused on her task. She had no time to think about the horrors around them, the alien soldiers hunting them, or the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. The virus she was uploading would either cripple the station's core systems or unleash a catastrophic chain reaction. There was no room for error. Behind her, Captain Victor Hale and the rest of the team kept their eyes peeled for any signs of the enemy. The station was a sprawling fortress, a technological marvel, but it was also a prison, a place where the invaders' power emanated from. Every inch of it was fortified, designed to repel the most sophisticated attacks. Yet here they were, a handful of humans, trying to turn the tide of the war with nothing but their wits, their courage, and the remnants of alien technology. The Resistance's infiltration had gone smoother than expected, but now they were within striking distance of the station's heart. They had evaded patrols and disabled internal security measures, but the countdown to their mission's success was growing shorter with every passing second. If they failed now, the alien leadership would regain its full strength, and Earth would fall once and for all. "I'm almost there," Dr. Novik muttered under her breath, sweat beading on her forehead as she typed furiously, bypassing firewalls and scrambling the station's mainframe. Hale peered through the narrow corridor, listening for any approaching footsteps. The last thing they needed was an alert. A full assault could wipe them out in seconds. His heart raced, but he remained calm. If there was one thing the Resistance had learned in the past few months, it was that patience was just as important as bravery. They had no choice but to keep pushing forward, to finish what they had started. Behind him, Jorik, the alien defector, paced nervously. Despite his insider knowledge, he couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens would eventually adapt, that they would learn too much about humanity's tactics. The Resistance had thrown them off balance, but the aliens were capable of rapid adjustments. He turned to Hale, his expression grim. "They're close," Jorik whispered, pointing to a distant panel where a flashing red light signaled the approach of alien reinforcements. "We don't have much time." Hale nodded, signaling for his team to prepare for a last stand. They knew what was at stake. The mission was the only hope for humanity's survival. If they succeeded, they would be able to destabilize the entire alien command, disorienting the invaders long enough to finish the war. Dr. Novik's voice cut through the tension. "It's done," she said, her eyes wide with relief. "The virus is in. We need to get out now." The team moved quickly, retracing their steps back toward the airlock that would take them back to their hijacked vessel. But as they reached the door, it slammed open with a deafening crash. A squad of heavily armored alien soldiers poured into the room, their weapons aimed directly at them. The mission was no longer about stealth, it was about survival. Hale's heart skipped a beat, but his training kicked in. He motioned for the team to spread out, taking cover behind a nearby console. The aliens moved with purpose, their movements precise and calculated, but they hadn't anticipated humanity's willingness to fight for their very existence. Hale and his team opened fire, unloading everything they had. The roar of gunfire echoed through the sterile halls of Valsharn, as sparks flew from the walls and alien armor. For every alien that fell, 2 more took its place. The fight was brutal, a deadly dance where every move could be their last. The Resistance had no choice but to keep pushing, to force their way through the alien defenses and reach the airlock before it was too late. Hale fought with everything he had. He had lost so many already, friends, comrades, soldiers, But now, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance, he couldn't afford to hesitate. He couldn't afford to fail. In the midst of the chaos, the station began to shake. Novak's virus was taking hold. The alien systems, once so strong and unyielding, were now crumbling, their shields flickering as their command structure disintegrated. It was working. But the victory was not without its cost. The aliens fought harder now, more desperate than ever to regain control. The team was being pushed back, but they had no choice. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop until the war was won. The battle inside Valsharn was chaos. Captain Victor Hale, his breath ragged, ducked behind a pillar as alien firepower ripped through the air, blasting holes in the walls. The alien soldiers were relentless, their numbers seeming to grow with each passing moment. Yet, Hale and his team pressed on, knowing that the fate of humanity was sealed to this moment. The virus was doing its job. Valsharn was slowly collapsing under the weight of its own systems being dismantled, but time was running out. Dr. Lena Novak's voice echoed through the comms, tinged with exhaustion but resolute. The core's destabilizing. We need to move. Now. We're not leaving without you, Hale responded, his voice firm. But Novak was already ahead of him, working at another terminal. I'm done here, she said, eyes locked on the screen where the countdown was flashing. The core is going critical. We need to get out, and we need to do it fast. The air around them hummed with energy as the alien systems faltered, lights flickered, and the ground beneath their feet trembled, as though the station itself knew it was on the brink of collapse. The chaos was infectious. The aliens' control over the station was unraveling, their once perfect coordination now disrupted. It was their final weakness, and the resistance was exploiting it with every ounce of their strength. The team made their way toward the airlock. Jorik, ever vigilant, provided cover, taking out the alien soldiers who still attempted to regroup. There are too many of them, he muttered, frustration in his voice. They're trying to regain control, but it's already too late. Hale nodded, but he knew their window of escape was closing fast. The airlock doors loomed ahead, just a few hundred feet away, but they were being pursued relentlessly. He gestured for Novak to hurry, but she shook her head. You go ahead, she said, her voice calm but insistent. I'll make sure the virus finishes its job. No, we're not leaving anyone behind, Hale said. He couldn't risk losing her now, not when they were so close. He grabbed her arm gently, pulling her toward the airlock. We finish this together. In that moment, Novak hesitated, just long enough for an alien soldier to burst through the corridor. Before Hale could react, Jorik was already there, blocking the soldier's path with expert precision. In a blur, he dispatched the alien, giving Hale and Novak the few extra moments they needed. With their hearts pounding, the team finally reached the airlock. Hale entered the control sequence, initiating the opening sequence. Outside, their hijacked vessel was ready, its engines already primed. They were so close to escaping, to completing the mission that had seemed impossible only months before. Then a voice cut through their comms, Jorik's voice. The station's coming apart faster than we thought. I'm setting the charges. Wait, Hale started, but it was too late. The airlock doors opened, and the station shook violently, the force of the collapse sending them tumbling forward. Jorik's voice came one final time, filled with urgency. Go now. They didn't hesitate. They rushed into their vessel, the door sealing behind them. The engines roared to life, and they shot away from Valsharn, leaving the failing station behind them. Behind them, the once unstoppable alien command center exploded in a blinding flash, its destruction sending shockwaves throughout the surrounding space. The alien leadership had fallen. Their forces were scattered and leaderless, vulnerable to the remaining human fleets that had gathered for one final assault. The world below, Earth, was still scared by the invasion. Cities reduced to ruins, millions of lives lost. But now, The survivors had something they hadn't had in years: hope. The alien empire was no more. Humanity had stood defiant and had won. The day had come when Earth was no longer the victim of an invader, but a world where humanity could rebuild, stronger and united. As their vessel cruised toward Earth, Hale looked out the window. The planet below was scared, but it was still their home. They had paid the price in blood, in sacrifice, but humanity had won. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they knew this war had ended, but a new beginning had begun. Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. The dawn of a new era had come.